Blood stained the dust of San Elizario, Texas, as Harlan Gray stumbled through the town square, one hand clutching his side where the bullet had torn through flesh and muscle. The year was 1875, and Betrayal had a way of finding even the most honorable of men in these lawless territories. Olivia Navarro watched from the shade of her father's mercantile, as the wounded cowboy collapsed against the wooden hitching post. Most folks averted their eyes. Trouble wasn't something anyone sought in a border town like San Elizario, especially not when it came bleeding down the main street in broad daylight. But Olivia couldn't look away. "Papa, there's a man hurt out there," she called over her shoulder, already untying her apron. "Leave it be, Olivia," her father warned from behind the counter where he was tallying the day's receipts. "That's Harlan Gray, been riding with the Keller gang. Whatever's happened to him is likely deserved." Olivia paused, her conscience warring with her father's wisdom. At 22, she'd seen enough of frontier justice to know that men often reaped what they sowed. But she'd also buried her mother 3 winters ago when no one would brave the snowstorm to fetch the doctor from El Paso. "I can't just watch him die, Papa," she said finally, reaching for the small medicine kit her father kept beneath the counter. "That man is trouble, Olivia. The kind that follows a person home." She met her father's worried gaze. "I'll be careful." The heat of the Texas sun beat down mercilessly as Olivia crossed the street, dust kicking up around the hem of her skirt. Closer now, she could see the ashen pallor of the cowboy's skin beneath his tan, the way his breath came in labored gasps. "Mr. Gray," she said softly, kneeling beside him. His eyes flew open, startlingly blue against his dirt-streaked face. For a moment, panic flashed across his features before being replaced with wary suspicion. "You know me." His voice was rough as sandpaper. "My father does." She hesitated before adding, "Everyone in San Elizario knows of the Keller gang." A bitter laugh escaped him, ending in a wince of pain. "Not part of that gang anymore. Seems they made that clear enough." He gestured weakly to the bloodstains spreading across his shirt. Olivia glanced around the street. A few curious onlookers had gathered at a safe distance, but no one offered help. The sheriff's office down the street remained quiet. Sheriff Wilson was likely out on his rounds. "Can you stand? We need to get you somewhere I can look at that wound." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "Why would you help me?" The question was fair. Olivia had asked herself the same thing when she'd stepped off the mercantile porch. "Because you're bleeding in the street, and I don't believe in letting men die when I might help them live." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or the ghost of respect. With a grunt of pain, he pushed himself upright, leaning heavily against her as she guided him toward the back of her father's store. "Olivia," her father hissed as they entered through the rear door. "What are you doing?" "He needs help, Papa," she said firmly, helping Harlan to a chair in the small storeroom. "I'm not asking you to harbor him. Just let me stop the bleeding and then he can be on his way." Her father looked between his daughter and the wounded outlaw, conflict plain on his weathered face. Finally, he sighed. 1 hour. Then he goes regardless of his condition. When they were alone, Olivia helped Harlan remove his vest and shirt. The bullet had torn through his side, leaving an angry wound that still oozed blood. "You're fortunate," she said, cleaning around the edges with water from a basin. "It passed clean through." Harlan watched her work, his jaw tight against the pain. "Where'd you learn doctoring?" "My mother taught me some. After she died, I read every medical text I could find." She threaded a needle with catgut. "This will hurt." He nodded once, then gripped the edge of the chair as she began stitching the wound. Not once did he cry out, though sweat beaded on his forehead and his knuckles turned white. "The Kellers did this to you?" she asked, partly to distract him, partly out of curiosity. His laugh was hollow. "Frank Keller. Seems he didn't appreciate me objecting to robbing the widow Jensen's ranch." Harlan's eyes clouded with memory. 6 years I rode with them, thought they were my brothers. Turns out loyalty only runs as deep as the next score. And now I've got a bullet hole, no horse, and a gang that wants me dead. He met her gaze. "Why are you really helping me, miss?" "Navarro, Olivia Navarro." She tied off the final stitch. "And I'm helping you because my mother always said God puts people in our path for a reason. I doubt God had anything to do with putting me in yours." There was no self-pity in his voice, just a weary acknowledgement of a hard truth. Olivia began wrapping bandages around his torso. "Nevertheless, here we are." A commotion from the front of the store interrupted them. Olivia's father appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. "Sheriff's here with 2 of Keller's men. They're asking if anyone's seen Gray." Harlan tensed, reaching instinctively for a gun that wasn't there. "Stay here," Olivia whispered, pressing him back into the chair. "I'll handle this." She walked calmly into the store, wiping her hands on her apron as if she'd been inventorying supplies. Sheriff Wilson stood near the counter, flanked by 2 rough-looking men whose eyes scanned the store with predatory intent. "Miss Navarro," the sheriff nodded politely. "These gentlemen are looking for a former associate of theirs, Harlan Gray, wounded, probably desperate." "You haven't seen him, have you?" Olivia met the sheriff's gaze steadily. "No, Sheriff. I've been in the storeroom most of the day." One of the men, tall with a jagged scar across his cheek, stepped forward. "Mind if we take a look around?" "Yes, I do mind," Olivia's father interjected. "Unless the sheriff has a warrant, this is private property." The scarred man's hand drifted toward his gun, but Sheriff Wilson placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Now, Navarro, we're just being thorough. Gray's dangerous, wanted for robbery and murder across 3 counties. Murder." Olivia couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. The second man, shorter, with a cruel twist to his mouth, smirked. "Shot a bank teller in Odessa last month. Cold blood. Man had 5 children." Olivia felt a chill run through her. Had she just aided a murderer? But something about the story didn't ring true. The man she'd just treated, who'd refused to rob a widow, didn't seem the type to gun down an innocent teller. "Well, he's not here," her father insisted. "Now, if you're not buying anything, I'd appreciate it if you'd move along. You're scaring off my customers." After a tense moment, Sheriff Wilson nodded. "All right, Navarro, but if you see him, you come get me right away, you hear? Harboring a fugitive is a serious offense." As they left, Olivia returned to the storeroom, her mind churning. Harlan was standing by the small window, peering cautiously through the dusty glass. "Did you kill a bank teller in Odessa?" she demanded without preamble. He turned to face her, expression grim. "No, but I know who did." He sank back into the chair, fatigue evident in every line of his body. "That would be Randall Keller, Frank's younger brother. I was there, though, couldn't stop it. That's when I started thinking about leaving." "And why should I believe you over the sheriff?" Harlan met her gaze directly. "You shouldn't. You don't know me, but I'm telling you the truth all the same." Something in his steady blue eyes made Olivia want to believe him, despite her better judgment. "They'll be watching for you. You can't leave town in broad daylight." "I know." He glanced at her father, who had entered behind her. "I won't bring trouble to your door any longer. Once it's dark, I'll go." The older Navarro studied him for a long moment. "My daughter seems to think you're worth saving, Mr. Gray. I'll reserve judgment. You can stay until nightfall in the room upstairs. Then I expect you gone." After her father left, Olivia helped Harlan up the narrow stairs to the small storeroom loft where excess inventory was kept. She made a pallet from empty grain sacks and a spare blanket. "Try to rest," she advised. The wound will need time to begin healing. As she turned to leave, his hand caught her wrist. The touch was light, almost hesitant. "Thank you, Miss Navarro. Not many would have done what you did today." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, Olivia felt something pass between them, a current of understanding, perhaps, or the recognition of kindred spirits despite their different paths. "Rest, Mr. Gray," she said softly, gently extracting her wrist from his grasp. "We'll figure out what comes next when you wake." What came next was unexpected. As dusk settled over San Elizario, Olivia climbed the stairs to check on her patient, only to find him gone. The window was open, curtains fluttering in the evening breeze. On the makeshift bed lay her father's spare shirt and a scrap of paper. "Thank you for your kindness. Better I leave now before I bring more trouble to your door. H.G." Olivia felt an irrational pang of disappointment. She told herself it was merely concern for his wound, still fresh and vulnerable to infection. But as she folded the note and tucked it into her pocket, she knew it was more than that. In their brief encounter, Harlan Gray had stirred something in her curiosity about the man behind the reputation, perhaps, or the forbidden thrill of aiding someone on the wrong side of the law. Life in San Elizario returned to its normal rhythms. Days passed. The Keller gang moved on, presumably still hunting their former member. Olivia found her thoughts drifting off into the wounded cowboy with the startling blue eyes, wondering if he'd survived, if he'd found someplace safe. A week after Harlan's disappearance, Olivia was closing up the store when Sheriff Wilson appeared at the counter. "Evening, Miss Navarro. Mind if I have a word?" Olivia's heart jumped, but she kept her expression neutral. "Of course, Sheriff. What can I help you with?" "Got an interesting report today." He removed his hat, turning it slowly in his hands. "Seems a man matching Harlan Gray's description was spotted over in Las Cruces, New Mexico territory." "Is that so?" Olivia continued tidying the counter, avoiding his scrutinizing gaze. Only this fellow wasn't robbing or causing trouble. He was working as a ranch hand for the Morales family. The sheriff leaned against the counter. "Curious thing is, when my deputy rode out there to investigate, the man was gone, but Mrs. Morales had quite the tale to tell." Olivia looked up then, unable to contain her interest. "What did she say?" Said this cowboy showed up at their door, wounded but healing. Offered to work for room and board. Then 3 nights ago he woke the whole household, got them out just before a group of men set fire to the barn. Sheriff Wilson watched her reaction closely. "Mrs. Morales says he saved their lives, then disappeared again, left them his pay to help rebuild." Relief and pride washed through Olivia. "Sounds like a decent man." Doesn't it?" The sheriff replaced his hat. "Makes me wonder if we got the wrong end of the stick about him." After he left, Olivia found herself smiling. Harlan Gray was alive and perhaps not the hardened outlaw everyone believed him to be. 2 more weeks passed. Spring was giving way to the brutal heat of a Texas summer when Olivia's life changed again. She was returning from delivering an order to the Jimenez farm outside town, her wagon loaded with produce they'd given in trade, when she spotted a figure slumped by the roadside. Drawing closer, her breath caught in her throat. Even with his hat pulled low, she recognized Harlan immediately. His horse was gone and blood stained the dust beside him. "Mr. Gray." She pulled the wagon to a stop, jumping down before it had fully settled. He raised his head slowly, recognition dawning through a haze of pain. "Miss Navarro, seems fate has a sense of humor." "What happened?" She helped him to his feet, noting how he favored his left leg. "Keller's caught up with me near the border." He grimaced as she helped him into the wagon. "Got away, but not before they put another bullet in me. Different spot this time, at least." The wound was in his thigh, not immediately life-threatening, but serious enough. Olivia hesitated, knowing she couldn't take him back to town. The Kellers might still be searching, and her father's patience would only stretch so far. "I have a place we can go," she decided. "My mother's family had a small cabin in the hills. No one uses it now, but it should be safe." The cabin was a half-day's journey from San Elizario, nestled in a stand of cottonwoods near a small spring. It was simple, one room with a stone fireplace, a bed and basic furnishings, but it had sheltered her mother's family for generations. "Wait here," Olivia said, helping Harlan onto the bed. "I need to get supplies from town." His hand caught hers. "Why are you doing this? You hardly know me. I could be everything they say I am." She considered him thoughtfully. "Are you?" "No." The single word held a weight of frustration and resignation. "But that doesn't seem to matter much out here." "It matters to me." She gently extracted her hand from his. "Rest. I'll be back before nightfall." Returning to town, Olivia moved quickly, gathering medical supplies, food, and necessities. She told her father she was visiting her mother's cousin in El Paso for a few days, a lie that tasted bitter on her tongue, but one she deemed necessary. By the time she returned to the cabin, the sun was setting, painting the hills in gold and crimson. Harlan was where she'd left him, but his color was worse, his forehead beaded with sweat. "The bullet's still in there," he said through gritted teeth when she examined the wound. "Going to need to come out." Olivia had assisted the town doctor with bullet extractions before, but she'd never performed one herself. The thought made her stomach churn, but there was no alternative. They were too far from town, and bringing a doctor would raise too many questions. "I'll need to clean the wound first," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Then we'll get that bullet out." As she worked, Harlan watched her with feverish eyes. "You're good at this. Should have been a doctor." "Women aren't doctors," she replied automatically, though the thought had occurred to her more than once. "They are in Boston. Met a lady doctor there once, smart as a whip." The conversation helped distract them both as Olivia prepared for the extraction. She sterilized her father's fishing knife in the fire, then took a deep breath. "This will hurt," she warned. "I have whiskey if you want it." Harlan shook his head. "Save it, I've had worse." Nevertheless, he cried out when the knife probed for the bullet, his body arching off the bed before he managed to control himself again. Olivia worked as quickly as she dared, her hands steady despite the pressure. When the bullet finally came free, Harlan sagged against the pillows, his face ghostly white beneath his tan. Olivia cleaned and bandaged the wound, then helped him drink some water. "You should sleep now," she said, wiping his brow with a damp cloth. His fingers caught the edge of her sleeve. "Stay, just nearby." Something in his vulnerable request touched her. Nodding, she settled into a chair beside the bed, watching as exhaustion finally pulled him under. In the quiet of the cabin, with only the sound of his breathing and the gentle crackle of the fire, Olivia studied Harlan Gray. Even in sleep, there was a tension to him, as if he'd spent so long looking over his shoulder that his body had forgotten how to truly rest. She wondered what path had led him to the Keller gang, what choices or circumstances had shaped his life. There was goodness in him, she was certain of it now. She'd seen it in his actions at the Morales ranch, in the gentle way he'd spoken to her despite his pain, in the fact that he'd left her home rather than risk bringing danger to her door. Sometime in the night, Harlan's fever spiked. He thrashed against the bedclothes, mumbling incoherently, occasionally crying out names Olivia didn't recognize. She bathed his face and chest with cool water, murmuring reassurances when his eyes flew open, wild and unseeing. "They're coming," he gasped during one such moment, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. You have to run. They'll kill you too. No one's coming, she soothed, placing her palm against his burning cheek. We're safe here, Harlan, I promise. Something in her voice seemed to reach him through the fever. He stilled, his gaze focusing on her face. Olivia, I'm here. He released her wrist, his hand instead finding hers. Don't leave. I won't, she whispered and kept her promise through the long night. Dawn found them both exhausted, but Harlan's fever had broken. He slept peacefully now, his breathing even, color returning to his face. Olivia dozed in the chair beside him, her hand still clasped in his. She woke to find him watching her, blue eyes clear and alert. You stayed, he said softly. Olivia straightened, self-conscious suddenly about their joined hands, though she made no move to pull away. You asked me to. A small smile touched his lips. Most people don't take my request so seriously. I'm not most people. She reluctantly withdrew her hand, rising to check his wound. How do you feel? Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo, but I'll live. He winced as she removed the bandage. Thanks to you. The wound looked better than she dared hope, no sign of infection, the edges already beginning to heal. You heal quickly, Mr. Gray. Harlan, he corrected. Think we're past formalities, don't you? Their eyes met, and Olivia felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun streaming through the cabin windows. Harlan, then. Over the next 3 days, they fell into a comfortable routine. Olivia tended his wound, prepared simple meals, and read aloud from the dog-eared copy of The Last of the Mohicans she'd found on a shelf. Harlan regained strength rapidly, and with it came a relaxation she hadn't seen in him before. On the 4th morning, she returned from gathering firewood to find him standing outside the cabin, testing his injured leg. Should you be up? She asked, dropping the wood by the door. He grinned, the expression transforming his face. Probably not, but I'm not much good at staying idle. Olivia found herself smiling back. This was a different Harlan from the guarded man she'd first encountered, still cautious, but with flashes of humor and warmth that surprised her. At least let me check the wound before you decide to run a foot race, she teased. Inside, as she examined his leg, Harlan grew serious again. I need to move on soon. The Kellers won't stop looking, and I've imposed on your kindness long enough. Olivia's hand stilled on the bandage. The thought of him leaving created an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. Where will you go? North, maybe, Montana or Wyoming. Somewhere the Kellers won't follow, he hesitated. Unless, she prompted when he fell silent. Harlan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. I've been thinking about clearing my name. The bank teller in Odessa, there were witnesses who saw it was Randall Keller who pulled the trigger, not me, if I could get them to testify. Hope kindled in Olivia's heart. You could be free, live without looking over your shoulder. It's a risk, he admitted. Going up against the Kellers, even with the law on my side, they have friends in high places. But it's the right thing, she said softly. And you're a man who wants to do the right thing, aren't you, Harlan? He looked at her then with an intensity that made her breath catch. Seems I want that more now than I did before I met you. The air between them changed, charged with unspoken feelings. Olivia became acutely aware of her hand still resting on his thigh, of how close they sat on the narrow bed. Harlan's gaze dropped to her lips for the briefest moment before he cleared his throat and looked away. I should, he began, but was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. They both froze. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs as Harlan rose swiftly, ignoring the pain it must have caused his leg. Stay here, he whispered, reaching for the rifle she'd brought from town. No, she caught his arm. This is my family's cabin. Whoever it is, I should greet them. Reluctantly, he nodded, but moved to position himself behind the door, rifle ready. Olivia stepped outside, shielding her eyes against the midday sun. Relief washed through her when she recognized the rider. Papa. Her father reined his horse to a stop, his expression a mixture of concern and disapproval. Olivia, I thought you might be here. His eyes swept past her to the cabin. I assume you're not alone. Before she could respond, Harlan appeared in the doorway, rifle lowered but still in hand. The two men regarded each other warily. Mr. Gray, her father nodded stiffly. I see you're recovering. Thanks to your daughter, sir. Olivia moved to stand between them. Papa, what brings you all the way out here? Word reached town that Frank Keller and his men are headed this way. They're claiming Harlan stole money from them before he left the gang. He fixed Harlan with a hard stare. Did you? No, sir, but Frank's never been one to let the truth interfere with a good story. Harlan's jaw tightened. How far behind you are they? A day, maybe less. They stopped in El Paso, got into some trouble there, bought us some time. Olivia felt the weight of the situation settling over them. We need to leave. Not we, Harlan corrected firmly. This is my fight, not yours. Her father dismounted, approaching them with measured steps. Actually, it seems my daughter has made it her fight. He sighed deeply. Which means it's now mine as well. Surprise flickered across Harlan's face. Sir, don't misunderstand me, Gray. I don't trust you, but I know my daughter and she's a good judge of character. He glanced at Olivia with a mixture of exasperation and affection. If she believes in you, there must be something worth believing in. Harlan's expression softened. I don't deserve her faith, or yours. Probably not, her father agreed bluntly, but here we are. Together, they formulated a plan. Olivia would return to San Elizario with her father, maintaining their normal routine to avoid suspicion. Harlan would head west, toward New Mexico territory, but only as a false trail. After a day, he would double back to San Elizario by a different route, where Olivia would help him get an audience with Judge Matthews, who was due to arrive for the circuit court session. Judge Matthews is fair, Olivia's father explained. If you can convince him your story is true, he might help clear your name. The plan was risky, depending on timing and luck as much as skill. But it was the best chance Harlan had of escaping the Kellers' vendetta permanently. As dusk approached, the time came for Olivia and her father to depart. Harlan walked them to their horses, his limp less pronounced now. Thank you, he said to her father, for not turning me in, for helping even though you have every reason not to. The older man studied him for a long moment. Don't make me regret it. He mounted his horse and moved a discreet distance away, giving his daughter a moment of privacy. Olivia turned to Harlan, suddenly uncertain what to say. Be careful. I will. His hand reached up, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You've saved my life twice now, Olivia Navarro. I won't waste the gift. Impulsively, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed a kiss to his cheek. I'll see you in 3 days. Don't be late. A smile curved his lips, warm and genuine. Yes, madam. The ride back to San Elizario was tense, father and daughter both lost in their thoughts. Finally, as the town came into view, Olivia broke the silence. Thank you for understanding, Papa. He gave her a sidelong glance. I don't understand, not really, but I trust you. He paused. You care for him, don't you? Olivia considered denying it, but the truth was written on her heart too clearly for lies. Yes, I don't know when it happened, but yes, he's an outlaw, Olivia. Former outlaw, she corrected gently, and I believe he's trying to change. Her father sighed heavily. For your sake, I hope you're right. The next 2 days passed with excruciating slowness. Olivia went about her usual tasks at the mercantile, all while watching the street for any sign of the Keller gang. On the afternoon of the second day, they arrived 5 hard-faced men led by Frank Keller himself. a tall man with cold eyes and a reputation for ruthless efficiency. They made no secret of their presence, swaggering into the saloon and loudly inquiring about Harlan Gray. Sheriff Wilson kept a close eye on them, but made no move to intervene. The Kellers had committed no crime in his jurisdiction, at least none he could prove. Judge Matthews arrived that same evening, taking rooms above the town's only restaurant. Olivia caught a glimpse of him, a distinguished older gentleman with silver hair and a reputation for strict but fair rulings. The third day dawned clear and hot. Olivia's nerves were stretched to breaking point as she waited for Harlan's return. The Kellers continued their conspicuous presence in town, Frank occasionally stopping people in the street to ask about his old friend Harlan. By mid-afternoon, there was still no sign of Harlan. Olivia began to fear the worst, that he'd been caught on the trail, or perhaps had decided the risk was too great and had continued west after all. Then, as she was sweeping the store's front porch, a familiar figure appeared at the end of the street. Not on horseback as planned, but walking steadily, his hat pulled low. Olivia's heart leapt to her throat. Harlan had returned and he was heading straight for the sheriff's office, just as the Keller gang emerged from the saloon across the street. Time seemed to slow as Frank Keller spotted him. A cruel smile spread across his face as he nudged his companions. They fanned out, blocking Harlan's path to the sheriff's office. "Well, look who it is," Frank called, loud enough for everyone in the street to hear. "The thief returns to the scene of the crime." Harlan stopped, facing his former leader with a calmness that belied the danger of his position. "Hello, Frank. You've got something that belongs to me, Harlan. We both know that's not true." Harlan's voice carried clearly in the suddenly quiet street. "Just like we both know it was Randall who killed that teller in Odessa, not me." Murmurs rippled through the gathering crowd. Frank's expression darkened. "You calling my brother a murderer? I'm calling it like it happened, and I'm done running from the truth." Harlan took a deliberate step forward. "I'm here to clear my name, Frank, with or without your cooperation." Frank's hand moved to his gun. "You won't live long enough to try." Olivia's breath caught. She wanted to cry out to stop what was about to happen, but before she could move, Sheriff Wilson appeared from a side street, rifle in hand. "That's enough, Keller," he called. "This is my town, and there'll be no shooting in my streets." Frank's cold gaze shifted to the sheriff. "This doesn't concern you, Wilson. It's between me and my former associate." "Actually," came another voice, "I believe it concerns the court." Judge Matthews stepped out of the restaurant, his presence commanding immediate attention. "I couldn't help but overhear something about a murder in Odessa." The situation balanced on a knife's edge. Frank and his men were outnumbered but dangerous. The judge's appearance had changed the dynamic, but Frank Keller wasn't a man who respected law above violence. Olivia held her breath as Harlan addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, I've ridden a long way to speak with you. I have information about crimes committed by the Keller gang, evidence that could clear my name and bring justice to their victims." Judge Matthews studied him thoughtfully. "Serious claims, Mr. Gray, Harlan Gray, the wanted man." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Yes, sir, but I'm innocent of the murders I've been accused of." Harlan's gaze never wavered. "I'm willing to stand trial to prove it." Frank's laugh cut through the tension. "He's a liar, Judge. And a thief. Stole $500 from our outfit before he ran." "That's not true," Harlan countered calmly. "Frank's brother Randall killed a teller during a bank robbery in Odessa. Frank wanted me to take the blame. When I refused and tried to leave the gang, they shot me and left me for dead." The judge's penetrating gaze moved between the two men. After a long moment, he nodded to Sheriff Wilson. "I think we should continue this discussion in your office, Sheriff." Mr. Gray, if you're willing to make a formal statement, I'll hear it. Judge, you can't be serious, Frank protested. This man is wanted in 3 counties, and yet he's voluntarily come forward, risking his freedom to speak with me. Judge Matthews fixed Frank with a stern look. That suggests either extraordinary foolishness or a compelling truth. I'm inclined to discover which. As the judge and sheriff escorted Harlan toward the jail, Frank made a sudden move toward his gun. Without thinking, Olivia cried out a warning. Harlan spun, drawing faster than seemed possible, his gun aimed squarely at Frank before the gang leader could clear his holster. The street froze in tableau, Harlan standing firm, gun steady, Frank with his hand on his weapon, the sheriff and judge watching with tense anticipation. "Don't do it, Frank," Harlan said quietly. "Not here, not now." For a terrible moment, Olivia thought Frank would draw anyway, forcing a shootout that could only end in bloodshed. Then, slowly, he removed his hand from his gun. "This isn't over, Harlan," he growled. "Yes," Judge Matthews interjected firmly. "I believe it is." He nodded to the sheriff. "I think Mr. Keller and his associates should be detained while we sort this matter out." Sheriff Wilson signaled to his deputies, who had appeared from the jail with rifles ready. Outnumbered and outgunned, Frank and his men had no choice but to surrender their weapons. As they were led away, Harlan holstered his gun and turned to follow the judge. His eyes found Olivia on the mercantile porch, and in that brief exchange of glances, she read both triumph and uncertainty. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Inside the sheriff's office, Harlan laid out his story in detail, his years with the Keller gang, the gradual escalation from cattle rustling to armed robbery, the killing of the teller in Odessa, and his subsequent attempt to leave the gang. He named witnesses who could corroborate his version of events, including a ranch hand who had been present at the Odessa robbery. Judge Matthews listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions that tested the consistency of Harlan's account. When he had finished, the judge sat back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "You understand, Mr. Gray, that your testimony alone is insufficient. We'll need to verify your claims." "I understand, Your Honor. In the meantime, I'm afraid you'll have to remain in custody." "You are still a wanted man, regardless of the circumstances." Harlan nodded, having expected nothing less. "As long as the Kellers stay locked up too, I can live with that." The judge permitted Olivia and her father to visit Harlan the following day. They found him calm, almost at peace despite his confinement. "Judge Matthews has sent telegrams to verify my story," he told them. "And the sheriff in Odessa is bringing in the witness I mentioned, Jim Curtis. He was working at the bank when Randall shot the teller." Olivia sat across from him, the bars between them a stark reminder of the obstacles they still faced. "How long will it take?" "A week, maybe more." Harlan's smile was tinged with resignation. "I've waited this long to clear my name, I can wait a bit longer." Her father cleared his throat. "I've spoken with Judge Matthews myself, told him what I know of your character." At Harlan's surprised look, he added gruffly, "Not much, admittedly, but enough to confirm parts of your story." Gratitude flooded Harlan's face. "Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet." "The judge is a fair man, but he follows the law to the letter if there's evidence against you elsewhere." "I understand." Harlan's gaze returned to Olivia. "Whatever happens, I won't regret coming back." The week that followed was the longest of Olivia's life. The Keller gang remained in custody, their threats against Harlan earning them no favors with Sheriff Wilson. Telegrams flew back and forth between San Elizario and various towns where the Kellers had operated. Witnesses arrived to give statements, including Jim Curtis, who confirmed it was Randall Keller who had killed the Odessa teller. Finally, 10 days after Harlan's return to San Elizario, Judge Matthews called a special hearing. The town hall was packed with curious citizens as the judge presented his findings. "Based on the evidence and testimony presented," he announced, "I find that Harlan Gray was not responsible for the murder of Edward Tillman in Odessa. Furthermore, the additional charges of robbery appear to have been committed under duress as part of the Keller gang's operations." A murmur ran through the crowd. Olivia, seated in the front row beside her father, felt hope blossoming in her chest. "However," the judge continued, "Mr. Gray did participate in numerous illegal activities during his time with the gang. For these crimes, he cannot escape responsibility entirely." Harlan, standing before the judge, nodded solemnly. "I understand, Your Honor. I'm prepared to accept whatever punishment the law demands." Judge Matthews studied him thoughtfully. 6 years with the Keller gang. By rights, you should serve at least that much time in prison." He paused, and Olivia felt her heart sink. "However, your voluntary return to face justice, your assistance in bringing the Kellers to account for their crimes, and the testimony of respected citizens regarding your character all suggest a man seeking redemption." The judge straightened in his chair. "Therefore, I sentence you to 2 years probation, to be served here in San Elizario under Sheriff Wilson's supervision. You will make restitution to the victims of the Keller gang to the best of your ability. You will not leave the county without permission, and you will report weekly to the sheriff." Relief washed over Olivia so strongly she nearly wept. Harlan bowed his head, accepting the sentence with dignity. "Thank you, Your Honor. I won't disappoint you." As for the Kellers, they faced a harsher judgment. Frank and Randall were both bound over for trial in Austin for multiple counts of robbery and murder. The evidence against them, bolstered by Harlan's testimony, was overwhelming. When the hearing concluded, Harlan found himself suddenly free, confined to the county, but no longer a fugitive. As he stepped out of the town hall into the bright Texas sunshine, Olivia was waiting. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the weeks of tension and uncertainty giving way to a tentative hope. "So," she said finally, 2 years in San Elizario." A smile tugged at his lips. "Assuming your father doesn't run me out of town first. He's coming around." She moved closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his gaze. "What will you do now?" Harlan glanced around the town square as if seeing it with new eyes. "Find honest work. Make amends where I can." His gaze returned to her, softening. "See if a certain merchant's daughter might consider taking a walk with me sometime, once the dust settles." Warmth bloomed in Olivia's chest. "I think she might be persuaded." The weeks that followed brought changes to San Elizario and to Harlan and Olivia. The Keller gang's reign of terror ended with Frank and Randall's conviction and sentencing to 20 years in the state penitentiary. The remaining gang members scattered, none willing to risk crossing Harlan now that his name had been cleared. Harlan found work at the Peterson Ranch outside town, his skill with horses quickly earning him a respected position. Each evening, he would ride into San Elizario to report to Sheriff Wilson, and more often than not, he would find his way to the Navarro Mercantile afterward. Olivia's father watched their growing attachment with cautious resignation. "He's still an ex-outlaw," he reminded his daughter one evening after Harlan had left. "He's a man who made mistakes and is making amends for them," she countered. "Isn't that what matters?" Her father studied her flushed cheeks and bright eyes. "You love him." It wasn't a question, but Olivia answered anyway. "Yes, I do," he sighed deeply. "Then I suppose I'd better get used to having him around." 3 months after the hearing, on a crisp autumn evening, Harlan took Olivia for a ride to the hills overlooking San Elizario. The setting sun painted the landscape in gold and amber as they spread a blanket beneath a gnarled oak tree. "I have something for you," Harlan said, reaching into his pocket. "It's not much, but—" He handed her a small wooden box. Inside lay a silver pendant in the shape of a compass rose, delicately worked and hanging from a fine chain. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, lifting it from the box. "I've been working on it at night after the ranch chores are done." He took it from her hands, moving behind her to fasten it around her neck. "The blacksmith let me use his tools." The pendant settled against her skin, cool and perfect. She turned to face him, touched beyond words by the gift and what it represented, not just its beauty or the effort it had taken, but the fact that he had created something lasting, something meant for her alone. "Thank you," she whispered. Harlan's hand came up to cup her cheek. "Olivia Navarro, you saw me when I was at my lowest, bleeding and broken, with nothing to offer but trouble. You could have looked away, most people would have, but you didn't." His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone. "You saved more than my life that day. You saved my soul. Made me believe I could be a better man." Olivia leaned into his touch. "You already were a better man. You just needed to remember it." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home, like all the pieces of her life that had seemed ordinary and predetermined were suddenly part of a grander design she was only now beginning to understand. They were married the following spring, with Judge Matthews returning to San Elizario to perform the ceremony. Olivia's father gave her away with tears in his eyes, having finally accepted that his daughter's heart belonged irrevocably to Harlan Gray. "Take care of her," he told Harlan gruffly at the reception. "She's all I have." Harlan clasped his hand firmly. "I will, sir, every day of my life." Their first year together brought challenges. Not everyone in San Elizario was quick to forget Harlan's past. There were whispers, sidelong glances, occasional confrontations with those who believed a man couldn't change his nature. But for every skeptic, there were others who saw the truth that Harlan Gray had found redemption in love and was building a life worthy of the second chance he'd been given. When Harlan's probation ended, Judge Matthews returned once more to San Elizario, this time to officially clear his record. "You've kept your word, Mr. Gray," the judge said, shaking his hand. "Paid your debt to society and then some. Thank you, Your Honor, for believing I could." The judge smiled. "I merely provided the opportunity. The rest was your doing." He glanced at Olivia, who stood nearby with their infant son, Henry. "Yours and your wife's." With his name fully cleared, Harlan had options he hadn't possessed before. He and Olivia discussed moving north, perhaps to Colorado or even Montana, where land was plentiful and the past might weigh less heavily. But San Elizario had become home. Olivia's father needed them, especially as his health began to fail. And Harlan had found not just acceptance in the community, but respect. Sheriff Wilson had even appointed him deputy during a particularly troublesome period when cattle rustlers had targeted local ranches. So they stayed, taking over the mercantile when Olivia's father became too frail to manage it alone. They expanded the business, adding a hardware section that Harlan oversaw. Their home above the store grew lively with the addition of 2 more children, a daughter, Clara, and another son, Samuel. 5 years after their wedding, on the anniversary of the day Harlan had first stumbled bleeding into San Elizario, he took Olivia back to the cabin in the hills where she had nursed him back to health. "I've been thinking," he said as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "This place deserves more than to sit empty most of the year." Olivia leaned against his shoulder. "What did you have in mind?" "I thought we might fix it up properly. Make it a place where people in trouble could find help, the way I did." He ran his fingers through her hair, a gesture that still sent warmth through her after all these years. Not everyone gets a second chance like mine. Maybe we could change that, at least for a few." Olivia smiled, her heart full. "A sanctuary." "Exactly." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "What do you think?" "I think," she said, turning to face him fully, "that I fall more in love with you every day, Harlan Gray." His eyes, still that startling blue that had captivated her from the beginning, crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Even though I still snore," she laughed. "Even though you snore." The transformation of the cabin took a year of weekends and evenings. They rebuilt the roof, added a second room, installed proper windows, and furnished it with necessities. Word spread quietly through San Elizario and beyond. If you were in trouble, if you needed a fresh start, the Grays might be able to help. Over the years, the cabin sheltered a succession of people seeking second chances: a young mother fleeing an abusive husband, a former prisoner trying to rebuild his life, a family who had lost everything in a fire. Some stayed briefly, others for months. All left better than they had arrived. As their own children grew, Harlan and Olivia taught them the value of compassion, of seeing beyond appearances and circumstances to the person beneath. They told them the story of how they met, how a wounded cowboy and a merchant's daughter had found love amid danger and uncertainty. "Your mother," Harlan would tell them, "saw me bleeding from betrayal, and her love became my bandage." He would take Olivia's hand then, his thumb brushing over the simple gold band he had placed there. "She healed more than just my wounds. She healed my heart." 20 years after Harlan had first stumbled into San Elizario, the town had grown considerably. The railroad had arrived, bringing prosperity and change. The Grays' mercantile had expanded into one of the largest businesses in the county, with their eldest son Henry managing much of the day-to-day operations. Olivia, now in her 40s but still with the same determination and compassion that had defined her youth, continued to serve as the town's unofficial healer. Though she had never received formal medical training, her knowledge and skill had saved countless lives over the years. Harlan, his dark hair now streaked with silver, had become one of the town's most respected citizens. He served on the town council, helped establish the region's first proper school, and still occasionally rode as a deputy when Sheriff Wilson, now in his 60s but refusing to retire, needed assistance. Their cabin in the hills had expanded too, growing into a proper homestead with multiple buildings where people could stay while rebuilding their lives. They called it Second Chance Ranch, and its reputation had spread throughout Texas and beyond. On warm evenings, Harlan and Olivia would often sit on the porch of their home above the mercantile, watching the life of San Elizario flow past. Sometimes they would catch each other's eye and smile, recognizing in that silent exchange the miracle of their shared life. "Do you ever wonder," Olivia asked him once, "what would have happened if you hadn't been shot that day? If you had just kept riding with the Kellers?" Harlan considered this, his weathered hand finding hers. "I'd likely be dead or in prison. Or worse, I'd be like Frank, consumed by bitterness and greed. And if I had listened to my father and not helped you," his blue eyes, still as intense as ever, held hers, "then I would have missed the greatest blessing of my life." He lifted her hand to his lips. "But I don't think that was ever possible. You helping me that day, it wasn't chance, Olivia. It was who you are." As the sun set over San Elizario, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson, Harlan and Olivia Gray sat together, surrounded by the life they had built from a moment of compassion and courage. Their children were grown, their grandchildren beginning to arrive. The wounds of the past had long since healed, leaving only the wisdom that comes from pain overcome and love discovered in the most unexpected circumstances. In a town that had witnessed countless stories over its long history, theirs remained one of the most beloved, the tale of a wounded outlaw, and the woman whose love had bandaged not just his bleeding body, but his betrayed heart. It was a story they would pass down through generations, a testament to the healing power of love and the possibility of redemption, even in the wild and unforgiving landscape of the American West.